Let me ask you, you got some news?
That's right, Chris. So I was just communicating with Senator Blumenthal, and since May, Senator Blumenthal has been working on a break the glass option to try and protect Mueller's work. As you know, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has refused to move legislation to protect Mueller that was moved out on a bipartisan basis from the Judiciary Committee. Well, this is a break the glass option that would simply require that Mueller's work be protected in the event that he is stifled or fired. And Senator Blumenthal has been talking with Republicans about this, Chris, for a couple of months. He thinks that there is some support for it because it is simply, at this point, about transparency, to make sure that no matter what happens, if Mueller were squeezed, that his work could be preserved.
Well, that's a great question, Charlie, because we were talking to a member of the House Judiciary Committee, talked about that committee's attempt, now that they have the majority come January 3rd in the House, to somehow subpoena the records of Robert Mueller. And even if he can't publicly pronounce them, they could get the records and announce the results of it for their own impeachment purposes themselves. Charlie? Okay, Charlie, let me go back to Charlie. Can you hear me now? Let me get back to Heidi. We've had this problem. Heidi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, let's talk about that. What about the steps that can be taken by either houses? You raised the question of Blumenthal from Connecticut talking about it, but he's got to get that through the Republican majority. They've got maybe 54 Republican senators standing in the way and helping the president, protecting the president, not questioning the president or helping Mueller, but hurting Mueller.
Right, and the early indications are that we've seen a major shift from last summer, Chris, when it seemed that there was bipartisan agreement in the Senate that they would stand strong against any move on the special counsel. The early reactions that we're seeing out of the Senate are simply, one of the strongest is from, frankly, the guy who's leaving, Senator Flake, who says we must move this legislation, but we're not seeing a strong response from anybody else. And Democrats, well, they don't take control of the House until January. So folks that I talk to, sources that I talk to, say if anything happens, it could happen pretty quickly in terms of Mueller potentially issuing indictments, and a decision will need to be made in the Senate whether there's going to be any kind of pushback. And right now, we just don't see that indication. Well,
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell warned House Democrats of using their new authority they'll get in January to launch investigations of Trump. Let's watch him.
The whole issue of presidential harassment is interesting. I remember when we tried it in the late 90s. We impeached President Clinton. His numbers went up and ours went down, and we underperformed in the next election. So the Democrats in the House will have to decide just how much presidential harassment they think is good strategy. I'm not so sure it'll work for them.
You know, I don't think the Democrats should take advice from Mitch McConnell because he's not operating or speaking in their interest or in the interest of the country in this regard. Why would he tell them not to take up their constitutional responsibility if Mueller comes out with it, basically the basis for an impeachment charge, and not to operate on it? Why would anybody think that's the right thing for America, Charlie?
Yeah, well, I don't think they're going to take that advice. You know, it occurs to me, though, that President Trump insulted two institutions today. He insulted the U.S. Senate by implying that they would become complicit in his obstruction of justice by going after the House of Representatives. That would be interesting to hear from, Mitch McConnell on that as well. He also really insulted the Department of Justice by putting in the acting attorney general's position really a pliable lackey as opposed to a credible attorney general. And it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. You know, I understand the people who say that they're seeing this strategic genius here. This almost smacks of desperation when you think about the president waiting till the day after the midterm elections, this day when we know that Mueller, is maybe, ending this pause, to take an action this extreme, this dramatic.
Well, how about this? Suppose he knows that Mueller was waiting until the election was over. You know, like Micah was waiting for the mother to die before he kills his brother. He's waiting for that.
Yep.
You know how it's done. So he says, wait a minute, he's going to operate any day now. He's going to come out with something against me and my family. I'm going to operate first. I'm going to get rid of this AG I don't trust. I'll put in a guy that you say is pliable. I think that's fair. And I'm going to begin to have steps ready to take against Mueller even before. How do we know this is the last step? How do we not know, Charlie and Heidi, tomorrow morning we get up and there's another step he takes along the lines of, I'm going to prevent Mueller from grabbing my kids? Because I really think that's what it's about. Trump has got to protect his family against indictment.
Well, Chris, the
I think
problem
that's
here
exactly
is
what it is.
transparency at this point, right? Because this is what was described to me and my colleagues when we were reporting on this issue as the so-called straitjacket approach that Judiciary Committee Democrats in both the House and the Senate were concerned about, that if there is that next step taken, we just won't know. Because the bigger threat all along has not been that the president would outright find a way to fire Mueller, but that he would squeeze him and cut off his resources. And that is,
we'll find out.
We wouldn't know, at least at this point.
Well, Charlie, that's already something that the new Attorney General, the acting Attorney General, Whitaker, has already said, that he could start starving the guy. Suppose he says no more typewriters, no more computers, no more assistants, no more clerical help. You're finished, buddy. Your cell date is up. Now, report or go away, or neither. Just don't talk anymore because you're not having it. I'm not going to pay for your room rent anymore. What's to stop this new Attorney General from doing that, the Mueller?
Well, that almost strikes me as too clever by half, as if we won't find out about it. Look, if he says no to the special prosecutor, remember, this has to be reported to Congress. He also is probably not going to be able to shut down the Southern District investigations. You know, and that's why I think that, maybe they think that this is the way that they're going to, have a stealth Saturday night massacre.
Yeah.
But nothing like this is going to be. There will be transparency at some point, and that's why what happened in Congress, this has changed the reality. And I'm not sure that the president fully understands how much trouble he is in or what he has done by taking this particular step. But there's no question about it. I mean, it is a significant thug move by the president to take this action today, when we're hearing about the anxiety about Don Jr. I mean, this is the day that's been circled on the calendar for a very, very long time. And it certainly indicates that he was fearful that Mueller might drop something very, very, very soon. Well,
as Shakespeare said, whether to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune or to take up arms against the sea of troubles and end them. And my question, Trump is probably thinking very much like Hamlet and is thinking, I better act.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.